CIOC, Jeremiah Kioni says indeed there are such plans. Jeff Kirui with the details.
The Constitutional Implementation Oversite Committee has been on a retreat at the coast considering key legal changes. According to the chairman of the committee, Jeremiah Kioni, the committee is considering a draft proposal to reintroduce the Prime Minister's position and 2 deputies, as well as creating 2 positions for Deputy President. The move is being seen as efforts to salvage the BBI, which among other things, sought to create 5 key executive positions at the top.
I am aware that there is a proposal that we'll be looking at tomorrow, but it has not been processed by the committee. We'll be looking at those proposals tomorrow. We'll be able to issue a better statement once the committee has considered that amendment.
The BBI document is still in abeyance after the Court of Appeal upheld a High Court ruling that declared the document null and void. The Attorney General Kihara Kariuki has moved to court to challenge the Court of Appeal findings. Leaders allied to President Uhuru Kenyatta and ODM leader Raila Odinga appear to be keen to pick some key proposals contained in the BBI document. Kioni says that his committee plans to have the changes passed through a referendum proposed to happen concurrently with next year's general election, which ultimately will take effect after the 2027 general election. According to Article 255 of the Constitution, any changes that touches on the functions of Parliament will require a referendum if it is approved by at least 233 members of Parliament. According to some legal experts, creating the position of a Prime Minister who will sit in 2 arms of government violates the spirit of separation of powers. The committee is also set to deliberate on bills seeking to have members of the cabinet appointed from among sitting members of Parliament.
So we want to return back to the old order where members of the cabinet are members of Parliament, and also county assemblies. There is no point of the governors appointing their members of the executive from other areas, but they should do so from within the elected and nominated county assembly members.
Jeff Kirui, KTN News.
A report.
Thank you, Jeff Kirui, for that. And indeed, that story shapes the conversation that I am about to have with Kimilili, Member of Parliament, Didmas Barasa, joining us virtually from Mombasa. Good morning, Mheshimiwa. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Great. Mheshimiwa, the story there, the soundbite, you say that you want to go back to the old order of reintroducing picking, that is, cabinet secretaries from members of Parliament. What is the rationale behind all this?
The rationale is that the current cabinet secretaries paid a lot of money, and that this money should go to develop this country in other sectors. If you will have ministers from amongst members of Parliament, they will only be paid some small amount of money being administrative and allowance. So that's where we want to go back there. We have a big problem today that cabinet secretaries are not appropriately responding to petitions, questions and statements raised by Kenyans through their members of Parliament, because they're not members of Parliament. They will do a short work and send statements to be read on behalf of them by chairmen of departmental committees. So we want to ensure that legislative role of members of Parliament, oversight, is much more effective than if you have a question against a particular cabinet minister. You will be sitting right next to him in the National Assembly, and he will rise to respond to your question. He will do a thorough job in terms of providing facts to the questions or statements sought by members of Parliament.
Mheshimiwa, still on that proposal to select the CSs from Parliament, there was that argument that actually technocrats and people who are not managing constituencies or any other workload would be best fit to sit in cabinet. So what would be the, while these people would be picked from Parliament, wouldn't there be this, what they call the overload of work, if you could call it?
Not really. Currently, ministries are not flowing in the same direction, and I tell you for free, because We have 2 technocrats. We have a PS, who is also a technocrat, and also we have a CS, who is a technocrat. So the 2 people will be pulling in different directions. But when you have a member of parliament as a minister, and his or her only role is policy direction, then you will have a clear separation of duties. But as currently, as we are speaking, we have many ministers who are also meddling in the work of the technocrat, who is actually a principal secretary. And during, of course, in the history of independence, the only time that we can remember as a country that our economy grew very well is during the tenure of President Mwai Kibaki. And the ministers were from National Assembly. They were members of parliament, and this country was able to grow the economy. So it's not about who is in charge of a ministry, whether he's a politician or not, but it's about clear separation of power, that when you are a technocrat in charge of daily running of the ministry, you should focus yourself to doing so, and when you are a cabinet secretary, focusing on the policy direction. And you know, the only area where policies are developed is the National Assembly. Yeah. Even the ministries that will do policy guidelines, we have given them some bit of a delegated authority. So Parliament is an area, is a hub where policies are approved.
Great, Mheshimiwa. Now, the introduction of the Prime Minister and 2 deputies. Let's go to that proposal, that suggestion first. First of all, what is the rationale again to come up with this proposal, and to what benefit will it have?
That proposal is going to be tabled today before the committee. But I can tell you without the fear of contradiction that it's a proposal that will not see light of day. It's an exercise in futility, but the committee has got the powers to process any proposal before it. This push to have the positions of a prime minister, the 2 deputy prime ministers, and the 2 deputy presidents seem to be being pushed by certain individuals in the government. Individuals who believe that coalitions can only hold together if there are positions to be shared. But I want to suggest to them an alternative, that coalitions can stick together if they have an objective of revamping our economy and taking this country forward, not necessarily on positions that are available to be shared. They seem to suggest to this country that those who are trying to build the coalitions, the One Kenya Alliance, that their coalition will not going to hold if there are no positions to be shared. Now, the section of our constitution that the committee will seek to repeal to accommodate the position of the prime minister and his 2 deputies, and the creating 2 deputy presidents are part of the clauses that fall within what the court said eternity clauses. That falls in the general description of the general doctrine of basic structure. So they can only be repealed through a referendum. And as a country, our hands are tied. The Constitution says that we can only go into a referendum when we are remaining with 1 year to elections.
Right.
Now, even if Parliament will approve this bill, these are constitutional amendments, and it goes to the President, and after the head of state going through it, and saying that this requires a referendum, he is supposed to commit the same to IEBC, who are supposed to carry out the referendum within a period of not more than 90 days. Do we have the time? We don't have the time. This country has so many problems. We are faced with so many challenges. But scarcity of civil servants is not part of the problem that this country is facing. In fact, our civil service is bloated to the point where we do not even have enough money to remunerate and pay them. So, if we have time as a country to engage in conversation, let us begin engaging in conversation around how we are going to improve our economy. as we speak today now, the cost of fuel is very high. And you know, when the cost of fuel increases, virtually the price of everything, a basic commodity, also goes up.
Because, Mheshimiwa,
so if we have time to engage in conversation, let us engage in conversations about how we are going to lower the cost of fuel and the cost of living, you know, in that manner.
Exactly, because Mheshimiwa, you bring the point of you know, the harsh economic times and what these would entail, because this is pretty much expanding the executive, something that was proposed in the BBI, and you did vote for no in the BBI. Would your concerns be some of the things you'll perhaps raise in the committee? I mean, as you meet in the committee today, because these proposals, we understand, or rather, they have been argued that when you introduce a prime minister, two deputies, and then now there is the proposal for two deputy presidents, you're expanding the executive even to the cost of how their offices are run, from the motorcades to their you know, staff in these offices. So with all these concerns that you're talking about, will you forward them to the committee?
The proposal is being tabled before the committee already today as I'm speaking now.
Yeah.
And I want to tell you that I am going to oppose that proposal. I will not support that proposal. That is a misplaced priority, and it's being pushed by people who have no agenda for the country, but they have an agenda for themselves, who are trying to assist the coalition being held together because they believe that coalitions can only hold together if there are positions on the table for them to share. Mm-hmm. And I subscribe to a different school of thought, that coalitions can even be built, can stick together, can be glued together by an objective that is beneficial to the rest population of the country. Mm-hmm. It's high time that we forget about ourselves and begin to think about Kenyans. Right. And I want to tell you that the problem that we are trying to cure today were created by leaders of yesterday. With my age, I am not going to be part and a parcel of a group of people who will try to create problems that the generation of tomorrow will try to cure. I will never be part of it. We have seen tendencies in this country where when the government pushes some piece of legislations, mm-hmm. those who are opposed to it are intimidated with various prosecution, with various care demands. And I want to tell the country that I am ready to go through any form of intimidation if by opposing this piece of legislative proposal will land me in those problems. Mm-hmm. I want to be part of the right history of this country.
Right. Mheshimiwa, as we bring this conversation to a close, there has been the push for constitutional change. From where you sit, wouldn't it be prudent even for Parliament to change some of the clauses through you know, acts of Parliament instead of waiting for the referendum? For instance, the allocation to the counties and others, while we wait to, you know, talk of constitutional, or rather the change through a referendum, because these changes can only take effect in the 2027 general election. Are there some clauses that perhaps as Parliament you'd even rally to be reintroduced and to be worked or dealt with right now?
By the way, contrary to the general view by certain people that we can quickly amend some laws in Parliament to accommodate some of the good things that are contained in the BBI, mm-hmm. I can tell you for free that we already have laws. For example, the law on county allocation, it says it should be a minimum of 15%, meaning we have no problem even if we will give counties 50% or 60% or 100%. So mm-hmm. the law already is there. The issues of giving tax subsidies, you know, to the young people who are engaging in business or tax holidays, that is something that can be done through just through a policy. And the Committee on Delegated Legislation will be able to approve them. Mm-hmm. And so to that law that governs Higher Education Laws Board, we can begin by writing off the debts that many students owe the Higher Education Laws Board. So the goodwill is not there to engage in, to approve the very policy guidelines that will operationalize some of the good things that were contained in BBI. Yeah. Because there were just some bit of icing sugar on the bigger cake for the creation of the position of Prime Minister and 2 Deputy Prime Ministers. There is nothing better about them. They were already put there so that the country can be hoodwinked into believing that the whole train of BBI is carrying nice and good goodies that all of us will have supported.
Indeed, Mheshimiwa Didmas Barasa, Member of Parliament for Kimilili, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Great, indeed. That is where we end up part 1, or rather we are headed into our first short commercial break right here on News Center.